Okay, so in your notebooks, you should have AIM 3.1 and what were the causes of the Industrial Revolution. You should have that stuff down in your notebooks. And away we go here. All right, today's pretty note heavy, so you have to bear with me. I'll give you a minute here. All right, while you finish up. So before we could start talking about industry and inventions and factories and stuff like that, we first have to talk about what's called the Agrarian Revolution. Advances in food production happen in big, huge leaps. This is a benefit to you because we just talked about another one in Global One, right? Neolithic Revolution. So this is like phase 2 of the Neolithic Revolution. So what we see is that there's another big leap in our ability to produce food in massive amounts. So our ability to produce food in massive amounts enables industry in the whole, and there's a couple of reasons why. So first, new farming techniques, inventions, etc., increase our ability to produce food, and this means a couple of important things. So, for example, let's say on a farm before the Agrarian Revolution, it took 50 people, a week's worth of labor to produce 100 pounds of food. Okay. Well, the Agrarian Revolution brings about new inventions and farming techniques and so on and so forth. Now we don't need 50 people in 1 week to produce 100 pounds of food. We become such efficient food producers that we don't need 50 people anymore. Now we need 5 people. And we don't need a week, we need a day. And we don't produce 100 pounds of food, we produce 1,000 pounds of food. So all of these kind of efficiencies compound. And the one truth now is that there's 45 more people than there were before. We used to use 50 people to do the farming. Now we're using 5. So what are we going to do with those other 45 people? Well, those other 45 people are now made available for all kinds of other jobs. And the vast majority of those jobs will be found in factories. So the first part of this story, and even without this, the labor force is not available to produce anything in factories. So there is no industry. So it's important to understand this part of it so that we can say what enabled the Industrial Revolution. It's this, okay? So this is like the first big part of it. All right. All right, for time purposes, I will ramble while you guys finish up. So in order for industry to be possible, we need 3 important things. We need raw materials, number 1. We need stuff to make things out of, okay, essentially. And we also need fuel to power these factories. That's number 1. So those raw materials that we're talking about are mostly iron and coal, okay? Without iron and coal, there is no factories, there is no industry. It's that simple. Okay, so that's the first thing that we have to understand. These raw materials are absolutely essential. Number 2, we need a labor force. If we're going to have a factory, we need people to work in it. Okay, without the people, there is no factory. Without the factory, there is no industry. Okay, so that's the next thing. And number 3, we need markets. You can produce as much as you want of a thing, but if no one's buying it, what's the point? So now you need to figure out how are you going to sell it, okay? So industry is only as strong as the amount of customers it has. So we need to find customers. So all of these things can be solved kind of with one strategy. And that strategy really is imperialism. So while you finish up, basically the way this works is the Industrial Revolution unit and the next unit that we study, imperialism, go hand in hand. They are very, very closely connected. So we said that we need 3 things in order for industry to take place. Well, a colonial empire will solve all three of those problems at once. Okay, so as a large, more powerful country conquers a less powerful country, it can do certain things. That place that it conquers, it could strip all of the natural resources and raw materials out of the land. That's number one. You can force the people there to do very cheap or, in some cases, free labor. We need a labor force, we said. And then last but not least, you can sell stuff to the people of those conquered places. So we needed raw materials. We stole it from their land. We needed labor. We basically forced them into cheap or free labor, the people that we conquered. And then we need a place to sell the stuff. So we sell the stuff right back to the place we stole the raw materials from to begin with. So all of these things kind of work together. That's the important thing to understand. So colonial empires and imperialism in general works like hand in glove with industry. So all of these things are kind of connected. And I don't know if you guys have heard of mercantilism, but mercantilism is the most popular kind of economic model for countries during this time. And that will be a factor also. So I think we have one more slide. Yep, last slide. All right, so to wrap up the notes, this is all going to start in Britain. And Britain becomes like the perfect starting place for this for a number of reasons. Number one, they have a bunch of those raw materials that we were talking about. So iron and coal are found in Britain naturally. Okay, that's number one. Number two, Britain at the time is famous for a colonial empire. They have a saying, the sun never sets on the British Empire. So they have everything from England, also taking into account the time period, the American colonies, when this is going on, are still possessions of Britain at the time. And they have India and South Africa and Australia and they have places literally all around the world that they can get raw materials from. They can have sources of cheaper free labor, and they also have markets for the sale of goods. So Britain becomes like the absolute perfect kind of starting place for industry. Also, if they're going to produce goods here, you can understand the geography of Britain also. If they have access to all these waterways, this is an easy way to move the goods, the raw materials in, and move the manufactured goods out. So they have like a perfect storm of circumstances that make industry possible, and that's why it's going to start there before anywhere else.